It's Wednesday, July 3rd, 2019. This is the Pro and the Con Show, and my name is Michael James Odd, and I am your host each and every day, 15 to 20 minutes. Welcome to the show. Please feel free to look back at past misadventures in this show, and please look forward to future episodes. I try to hold it live 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. Pacific time. Today is July 3rd, and I'm actually going a little bit early. I got some things going on later, so I won't be able to do the show live at 6 p.m. I apologize for anyone that looks in on Facebook Live and doesn't see me live. It's going to be the same. These shows, by the way, are unedited in any way, shape, or form. I do not use a teleprompter. There is no preparation other than me looking at information for a couple of hours before the show, and then based on what I see there in the events of the day, I decide what to make an impromptu discussion with you today or that day. All right, so let's see here. What I wanted to say today is that again, talking about why do the show and the Pro and Con Show. So I'm encouraging dialogue. I'm encouraging people to be open and accepting that there are other opinions, and those opinions or maybe perceptions is a better way to say it. There are other perceptions of the same truth. And I've held up a coin multiple times and said, look at both sides. You're looking at the one side. I'm looking at the other. We see different images on both sides of that coin, but it is in fact the same coin. And the truth is the amalgam of all those sides of the coin, the pro and the con, the good and the bad, the for and against, and so on. And so we've got to open our hearts and our minds to this concept that the issues are complex. They take more than 10 seconds or 30 seconds to discuss. They can take hours, I'm sure, or maybe even a few days. And that's exactly what I'm suggesting. A good government, a government for the people, would do this. Every month we would talk about some significant issue, and we would talk about it in depth as a nation. It's easy to do with modern communications, okay? Televisions, radio, the internet with all the different information streams available. The possibilities are infinite as to how we can communicate with each other. And, so we cover these things. And then other people will say, well, you can't change anything. Nothing's going to change. Well, no. Any of you out there that are cynical and feeling that way or thinking that way, I would like to challenge you in a very strong way. The reason why is that, I can't say that we as individuals or even small groups of us behave admirably at all times. In fact, it's absolutely true that we don't. There are times where all of us, I'm sure me included, have had things that we've done that we regret that we did, that we could have been a better friend, family member, citizen of the earth, whatever. Okay? But on the whole, if we understand that something egregious is happening, we can fix it. And there are many, 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 many examples. So let me just start with a few examples in the Wild Kingdom. So back in the 70s, when I was a boy, the use of this pesticide DDT was very, very popular. And it got into the food chain, and it ended up concentrating at the top of the food chain. So our national symbol, the bald eagle, was suffering mightily because of DDT coming up through the food chain up to the eagles, and it was causing the eggshells on their eggs to be greatly weakened, thinned and weakened, I think. And so the bald eagle population was plummeting. And I remember, even though I was a young person, I remember distinctly that there was, even back in the day, some amount of disagreement over whether DDT was ultimately the main fix for this, or eliminating the use of DDT. But there was enough evidence that we said, we're going to do this. We're going to try it. We're going to eliminate DDT. We're going to stop, the widespread use of it. And it took a few years, but the bald eagle population started to rebound. And in fact, I live in the state of Wisconsin, and I often commute across the border west of here into Minnesota. And I will say, there's rivers, the Mississippi is around this area, Minnesota and the St. Croix rivers all around in through this area. And I see bald eagles all the time now. I've seen there was some of the towns along one of the rivers. I don't remember the name of it right off the top of my head, but famous nesting area for bald eagles, and you can actually, if you go there, you can see several at one time. I think dozens at one time, actually, depending on how lucky you are. So that's an example. Another example, when I was a boy, used to come up to the state of Minnesota, western Minnesota, over in Otter Tail County, and we went to a resort, and we would fish this lake up there. The resort was lakeside. And when I was a boy, 4, 5, 6, 7 years old, oh gosh, we used to catch fish like crazy. Large crappie and walleye and smallmouth bass, sunfish. And it was really actually very easy to catch fish back in the day. And there were limits, but the bigger the fish was, the more prized it was. And as long as the limit was reached, and it was a fairly small limit, then you could take and keep the fish. And what happened, and I saw this, and I'm sure if you have been, I'm 58 years old, been fishing in the Midwest and in the state of Minnesota, state of Wisconsin, and so on, you notice that the population of sport fish got quite low at one point. And in fact, I remember when I was 10, 12, 14 years old, there was just a huge shift in how easy it was to catch a fish. It was much, much, much harder, and much, much harder to gain your limit of fish during the vacation that we were up there. And so over the course, I don't know how long now it's been, 10, 15 years, 20 years maybe, I don't know, but there's a biologist started studying the fish in the wild, and they understood which fish were absolutely crucial to the life cycle of the sport fish. And it's my understanding, they actually study it by a lake and stuff like that. And so now there's these slot limits, they're called. And I haven't been fishing in many years, but I've talked to people who fish, and they say that the fishing populations have rebounded tremendously. Fishing is good now these days. It's relatively easy to catch a fish, which is always fun, and one of the reasons why people spend time out there on our lakes and rivers fishing. And it's all because they analyze the life cycle of the fish and determine that there are certain fish that you just have to leave alone. And so there's limits. And so certain small fish you can't touch, certain big fish you can't touch. And I think unless I'm misinformed, I think it actually varies somewhat by the lake or river that you're on. But in any case, the human population realized that we are causing a tremendous concern, and we were able to fix it, to cause this to rebound. And going out to the oceans, this was a common practice. We were overfishing some of the world's commercial fishing areas, off the coasts of some of the countries around the world. We're overfishing them, and the populations of the fish were not coming back. They couldn't, because we were taking too many of them. And so nationally, internationally, we agreed that we weren't going to do this way anymore. And so they established limits, and they monitor it very closely. And what has happened is many of the fish populations, which were in dire straits, the commercial fish, tuna and cod and so on, which were in dire straits just a handful of years ago, have rebounded nicely because, we've taken the time to fix it. I could go on and on and on. There's sperm whales have been rebounding because we internationally agreed that we're going to effectively end whaling. I think there's only one country, Japan, which me personally is unfortunate that any countries, but they have a long time tradition about whaling, and has a certain history and lore in their culture, so harder for them. And there is still some whaling that goes on, but it's by the native peoples, and it's not done commercially, and you don't have these big harpoon cannons and all this other stuff that was causing the whale population to be really right on the edge of extinction at one point. So they're rebounding, and so the point on all of these things is that we can fix these things. We just have to recognize that we have the problem, and two, be willing to fix it. And so this then goes to the two other topics that I would like to talk about today. So one of them is related to the wildlife examples that I was providing, and that is the environment. We definitely are affecting the environment. The population of the world is solidly 7 times what it was just 200 years ago. The amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is over twice what it historically has been, plus minus. And there's no argument by any sane or educated scientists or environmentalists or whatever that the CO2 concentration, it definitely is a so-called greenhouse gas. It helps hold the sun's heat in the atmosphere. And this is not an opinion. This is the fact. So concentrations are roughly twice. The amount of heat being held in, therefore, is increasing, and these changes can be having a massive effect, because there's certain things in our world where even just a few degrees of change can have catastrophic effects. And one of the big areas right now is that the oceans are warming, and it's just a couple of degrees kind of thing from what they have been historically. But that amount has caused some of the coral reefs around the world to really suffer, because there's I want to say algae. I hope I'm not misquoting, but there is a cooperation between the coral and some other species in the coral reef, and this pretty, to you and me, pretty subtle difference in temperature actually has a huge effect on some of this symbiotic relationship. And when some of these species are affected by the higher temperatures and effectively die, then the whole the whole coral chain, the whole system that was, supporting each other in this delicate balance, suffers mightily. And there are people who report that in just a handful of years, diving on the same places and the same reefs, just over a period of like 2 to 4 years, they've seen wholesale die-off of corals in some areas, again, because the temperature of the oceans is just coming up, just a couple of degrees centigrade, which is, maybe 3 or 4 degrees Fahrenheit. Seemingly not very much, but it's enough to have a catastrophic effect. So we've got to realize that we're affecting the earth, and we've got to get rid of the CO2. Just like we got the DDT out of our systems, and the bald eagles came back, and we established slot limits for fishing, and the sport fishing came back, and we established international limits on fishing commercially off the coasts of our oceanfront coasts. And now the commercial fishing industry is coming back, okay? And on and on and on. There's many, many, many examples. Well, here we go. And then the second thing is election reform. So I talked about the environment, well, also election reform. So, there's a lot of people that are very frustrated. I'm amongst them. That's why I'm doing this show, because I'm a frustrated citizen of this country. And the fundamental problem, and even in the Democratic debates, the ones that were held a week or two ago, some of those candidates actually brought this forward, that the political system and all the money and special interests and everything that are now focused on our election systems, and effectively by virtue of them trying to win their arguments, trying to tear us apart, trying to destroy the fabric of our communities. Lincoln said, a house divided, it's probably biblical too, a house divided cannot fall, or cannot stand. A house divided cannot stand. So what's the problem? The problem is we have these political parties, and the way that we bring up candidates into our system, and we can overhaul it, just like we got rid of DDT, and we set slot limits, and we set commercial fishing limits, and on and on and on and on and on. We can redo this. We can do it. You and I just have to say, okay, this is what we're going to do next. We're going to revamp the election system. We're going to combine basically how we volunteer potential jury members from the general population. We're going to just sift and say, okay, every year, so many of them from the various regions around the country, we're going to just randomly select you. And then depending on your age and skills and whatnot, we're going to put you as, well, these are potential candidates for representative or senator or president even, okay? And then there will be an evaluation process where we look at the strengths and weaknesses of those potential candidates, and the stronger ones will percolate up, and at some point we're going to say, okay, now we're ready. We're through the process of evaluating them, we're ready to actually hold a general election and elect some of these people and have them serve us, and have them take an oath of service, so that they understand and repeat on at least an annual basis the need, the solemn and noble promise to just serve the people, and not at their own behest, but at the behest of the people, their friends and neighbors, and the rest of the citizens in general, okay, in totality. Okay, so that's why I do the Pro and Con Show. I'm trying to help. I'm trying to encourage us to come together. Please, please, please get more involved in your communities. Get more involved, especially in your government officials and your representatives, and understanding what they're doing, and trying to understand the issues, pro and con, good and bad, for and against. And then act. Okay, we need to replace apathy with action. All right, so time is up for today. This is Michael James Ott for the Pro and Con Show. Until the next show, bye for now.